Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 17 of Code Geass. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. Now, last we left off, we were treated to a rather shocking revelation courtesy of Mao that Suzaku was, putting it nicely, involved in his father's death. And I didn't believe it at first, but, everyone seemed to be treating it as though it were true. So I guess there's no choice but to believe that this is sort of something that crystallized Suzaku's views rather than being a lie. So now, with the aftermath of this whole business with Mao, I feel like there's gonna be fallout, because I feel like Lelouch is only just learning this horrible truth about Suzaku. And, I mean, sure, maybe Lelouch doesn't believe it initially, but given how Suzaku's reacting, man. And I feel like Lelouch is sort of angling here, it's not just your secret, it's also going to be my secret too. Although I guess not, maybe... I mean, he seems to have latched on to the idea that the death is sort of symbolic too. Everyone essentially needed this to, surrender peacefully without more bloodshed, but, man. I guess at least Lelouch is sort of understanding that this is really serious business, because sure, he killed the Governor General, whatever his name was, Clovis. Sure, he killed him and he was a half-brother, and that he claims was bad enough. I like how everybody's being forced to sketch Lelouch as he's just thinking introspectively about murder and all that. And I guess, interestingly enough, Shirley, the way she was lingering over that drawing, I was wondering if maybe she would start to remember a little bit, but I suppose not. So, seeing as how this is the Clovis Memorial Art Museum, I guess it makes sense they would do something like that for, on their terms, a slain hero, but, I'm wondering if this might be, ripe for a bombing or something, Especially seeing as how, Euphemia's here and she's picking out a painting, it's which one of these is the best, which one has the most merit. And there are all these sort of, imperialistic, depicting the emperor and, nice English countryside and things like that. None of it really has to do with Area 11, despite that being the location of the museum. So interestingly, It seems like the Japanese Liberation Front has come crawling to the Order of the Black Knights. That Colonel Toto guy, he's been captured. And, it really did seem like he was the linchpin of everything else. Ooh, interesting. So Lelouch is getting Dietered to oversee things, and he's that guy who may or may not be a traitor. So, it seems like things are getting interesting, because they do need to move these nightmare frames in order to, free the Colonel, but, those aren't just something you can move, Like, he said it himself, dismantle them and, disperse them across 18 different routes, I guess the idea being that if you dismantle them small enough, they can sort of pass by unseen. So it seems like the plot's thickening for Cornelia as well. People have been spotted and now she's deciding it's time to, lay down the law. Although something tells me it's not going to go to plan if Lelouch is mobilizing things. He might not necessarily know about her and her troop movements, but things are gonna happen. And interestingly, Euphemia, she's essentially choosing a champion, it seems like, and I'm wondering if Suzaku's a contender. I feel like he shouldn't be, given that he is an 11, merely an honorary Britannian, but something tells me that Euphemia would choose him given the opportunity. So I guess it's nice that Nunnally seems to be no worse off from that whole misadventure. I mean, not to be crass, but she probably didn't see much of what was going on. So, maybe that works to your benefit. I feel like, it's one thing if you've been blind from birth, but if you were blinded, you don't necessarily have the sort of affinity you would otherwise. So I'm wondering if maybe a lot of what was going on was sort of lost on her. Now there we have it. It seems as though he's been chosen for a higher purpose. I bet this was Euphemia's doing. In fact, I'd be surprised if it weren't the case. Oh. Yeah, for Lelouch to bring up something serious and mysterious like that, I feel like, this is a good time for things to hit the fan. And I guess now that Lelouch is bringing up, hey, Nunnally, what do you think about Suzaku? He's hinting at something here, and I feel like, Nunnally is too kind-hearted to understand. Although that said, now that we've transitioned over back to Shirley, it's interesting that she's still got that sketch, albeit the face is erased. I'm wondering if that was, sort of a residual effect of the Geass, she can't remember his face even as she looks at it. That would be interesting, because there are, some limits and parameters of the Geass that aren't quite clear. Because, how permanent is it, really? If no end condition is specified, will it end? Alright, so I guess the idea of her night is, a topic of interest, but, not one that pertains to the museum, as the fat guy said. Although I do get the feeling it is, in fact, Suzaku has been chosen. I guess, interestingly, the Japanese Liberation Front has some reservations on working with the Black Knights, which, that does make a degree of sense considering everything that's happened up until now, but, really, what choice do they have? They're kind of on the back foot, they're missing General Toto, there's that whole incident with the ship exploding, really, they're in this position where they really can't choose much of anything. So this is interesting, Rakshata. That strikes me as like a Hindi name or something like that. So I'm wondering, like, is the idea that people of Indian descent are in the Britannian Empire and they're higher up than 11s? Although, for what it's worth, Rakshata seems to be a bit of a technical expert here. Maybe in some of, like, the ancillary Nightmare Frame stuff. Not necessarily the main thing. So what of Colonel Toto? This is, certainly not a very hospitable jail cell. And, oh. So, I guess the knight in question is the executioner, and it's Suzaku. So that's, that's something. And, obviously, like, Suzaku's not going to be keen on doing this, but I guess the question is, if he wants to gain favor in the military, like, it's something he's going to have to do, right? Even if it does rankle. If he truly does want to change the system from within. I guess this is where his morals and ideals get put to the test here. At least in theory, Lelouch and the Black Knights have decided to show up and spoil all the would-be fun. And interestingly enough, these are those new Nightmare Frames. Maybe not new, but, those belonging to the Japanese Liberation Front. I believe they were too late to show up to that business on the mountain. These are the elite, as it were. And they certainly seem to be rather elite, seeing as how they slice through all the others like butter. So it's interesting that the Black Knights are seemingly not actually taking part in this. They're just sort of, supplying logistics, which, I'm sure Lelouch would take advantage of that. If he doesn't have to get his hands dirty, he can pin the blame on the Japanese Liberation Front if things go south. He certainly wouldn't be above that. I also find it interesting that the Guren Mark II is seemingly using its radiation weapon. I feel like that's not something you should do when unshielded people of interest are nearby. So this is kind of interesting. Lelouch is essentially sort of denying his reputation that he essentially performed a military miracle. The idea is like, no, it wasn't a miracle. There was tactics and strategy that went into it. You did play a role, but you weren't the end-all be-all. Nevertheless, I do want your help. I guess that's sort of like a tactful way of establishing that he's the boss here. And that said, I feel like Colonel Toto wouldn't necessarily be averse to working together in a pragmatic sense, but, oh, okay. Never mind, Lelouch is, knocking him down a peg, I guess. Okay, so I guess the idea is like struggle and die in vain, or work with me towards victory, but you're not going to be the star player. I guess that's reasonable and to be expected from Zero. So seeing as how we keep cutting back to this business about the art museum, I feel like it's going to be somewhat significant for Euphemia to choose the winning piece of artwork. I feel like she would choose something peaceful, something depicting like, calm and peace rather than something imperialistic or nationalistic or warlike. It would make sense to me, but I feel like in so doing, it's going to prove that, what she believes is a folly, I guess. Maybe not that she's necessarily wrong, but that, peace isn't going to be happening for a while, and sometimes the only way to achieve peace is through war. If people are intent on causing trouble, sometimes you do have to confront them head on. It's not something you should want to do necessarily, and I think that is the lesson to be learned, but, you know, when it has to be done, it has to be done. You can't shy away from it. Alright, so I feel like this here is a machine designed for Toto, and, you know, just because it looks special, I feel like he's about to really mess up some Imperial Britannians. I mean, like, we're talking like a black nightmare frame here, and it's got a cape. Like, kind of reminds me of, what was that? Like, Shin Getter Robo? One of the OVAs with, like, a black Getter 1. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if this was deliberate, but I suppose there's also, the juxtaposition between that and the Lancelot, you know? Like, the two are diametrically opposed in, well, many ways, really, even if the pilots are similar in some regards. Ooh. So it seems like all this pageantry at the art museum is being interrupted by, the military goings-on, which... You know, I guess this is interesting in another way, in that, you know, a lot of the nobility are playing around in an art museum when serious business is going on. You know, they would do well to focus on the important things. So I guess the question is, can the Lancelot win? You know, it's numerically outnumbered for certain, but that hasn't been an issue in the past, although... You know, the nightmare frames he's up against are more than the usual rabble he's had to deal with, so, I don't know. It really does seem like all bets are off. Although, if I were to wager, I would say, you know, Suzaku's got his work cut out for him, you know. He's clearly not at his best after this whole murder business, and, I feel like Lelouch has a bit more data on how to deal with the Lancelot, therefore they can sort of, you know, use their superior numbers to their best advantage. You know, if they know what he's gonna do, they can plan a counterattack that he won't be prepared for. I guess case in point, you know, they've sort of predicted this already, allowing who is ostensibly a grunt to, like, you know, smack the gun out of his hand. Oh dear, indeed. So that's something, alright. I mean, good on Suzaku for not dying, but boy howdy. This isn't good for the reputation of the Lancelot for it to be, maybe not defeated, but certainly wounded. I mean, immediately, like, Suzaku's exposed. Having an exposed cockpit is no good. In multiple ways, I guess, you know, it puts the pilot in danger, but at the same time it sort of reveals this. And Lelouch is not taking it well. I guess I assumed he might have taken it better than this. He might have taken it in stride to a degree, but I guess from his perspective, this is a betrayal on an unprecedented level. Man. And I guess, unfortunately, he really had Suzaku on the ropes here, but no longer. You know, without Lelouch to coordinate things, I feel like Suzaku will be able to, you know, scrape through. You know, at least Toto's willing to call his bluff here. It's like, you know, hey, like, you still willing to carry out my execution? Yeah, so I guess this is the clash of their values, you know. Does it make sense to try and overthrow society as it is, or should you try and reform it? And, you know, really, they fundamentally disagree. But I think it is very telling here that Lelouch as Zero is essentially having a total lapse in issuing orders. Because, I mean, like, I guess when you think about it, Suzaku was instrumental in helping him save Nunnally. So, you know, I think I can forgive him being a bit shell-shocked by this whole thing, but... Oh. Okay, so he's willing to blow everything to try and save Suzaku. Like, no, don't attack. Huh. Wow. So I guess that's mighty convenient that the Lancelot had another trick up its sleeve to get him out of trouble, but, man. You know, the somber music is telling me that something bad's gonna happen here. You know, I'm wondering, like, surely this couldn't be the end of Suzaku, right? I mean, Lelouch certainly would see that it's not the case, but, man. I mean, at least, Lelouch has the plausible deniability of there are reinforcements on the way, so it's better to get out of Dodge while we still can. You know, I mean, Toto said it himself, there's a big difference between a battle you've lost and a battle you can't win. You know, sometimes it's better to cut your losses while the getting's good. So interestingly, you know, this is essentially televised as, you know, the Black Knights were repelled, but they really did achieve their goal. You know, they saved the Colonel. Oh. Okay, so she is answering the question about her knight. So I guess for better or for worse, she has chosen Suzaku. And it seems like people aren't too happy about that. I mean, understandably so if they're calling him a coward and a traitor for not pursuing. Oh dear. It seems like the situation really has gotten worse if Suzaku's outwardly declaring enmity towards the Colonel, who was ostensibly a friend. And I guess, Lelouch is having a real one. Man, that's the pinnacle of mental stability right there, you know. I mean, I suppose there's a bit of humor in the situation, but I don't know if I'd have the guts to laugh like Lelouch is. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.